phenotypes, which is what we see of an organism, what we're interested often is how much or what part of the phenotype is inherited by the offspring. And this is where we're interested in something called heritability. And if you remember, we looked at some things here earlier that the phenotype or the variance in the phenotype can be partitioned into this additive effect, right? A dominance effect and some sort of an environmental effect that we put on here. Now, when individuals mate and produce offspring, the only part that gets passed on is going to be the additive effect. The dominance effect occurs because of interactions between two alleles at the same locus, so a single parent is not going to pass on dominance, and then it's also not going to pass on the interactive effects or any sort of environmental effects. So what we're interested in is this added proportion of that. And so when we look at a population, we can see how that works by looking at what the additive effect, the influence is. So if we go back and look at our model here, let's get rid of dominance. If we have no dominance and no environmental effects, and we hit setup, what we should see is that the genotype frequencies are exactly parallel the phenotypic frequencies, right? So basically, there's a one-to-one correspondence here that you see. And so in this case, the heritability should be 1 because all of the variability in the phenotype is explained by the variability in genotype. And you can see this quite easily by going to look at it graphically. So if we open up a jump file, there's an output file associated with this file called the HW output. And if we open that up, then what we're interested in is the additive variance, which is this column, and the phenotypic variance here. Those are the two things we're interested in. And so we want to know how much of the phenotypic variance is explained by the additive variance. And so if we go to use it, we can use the analyze menu and do fit by y by x, or use this one. So we're looking at the independent variable is going to be the additive, and the phenotype is going to be our response, or dependent variable. And so if we look at this, we can see that they fit along a line. If we do a fit line on this, we get a straight line, and R square is 1, meaning that all of the variance in the phenotype is explained by variance in the additive, and there's nothing else in the model, which is exactly what we would expect given that. So the next thing we want to do is look at what happens if we add dominance to it. So if we go back to what I showed you before with our complete dominance here, and we hit setup. Right now, the phenotype is not a direct one-to-one correspondence to the genotype, right? So the phenotypic variance is different than the genotypic variance. So if we look at our jump file, again, open up our output file here in jump, we can take a look and see how that does it. And what we're interested in here is the same thing. So we're going to look at either analyze menu or fit y by x from that. And then we're going to look at additive and phenotype, and we hit OK. You'll notice now that this value in the previous one was up here. Now it's down here because of the dominance. If we fit a line to these values, we now get a R-square of 0.88, which means that only 88% of the phenotypic variance is explained by the additive variance. The rest of it is going to be explained by the dominance variance, right, in this case, because there's no environmental variance. Now, if we throw in some environmental variance, we can hit, let's just get rid of our dominance in this case, and let's throw in some environmental variance here, and we hit setup, and once again we see that, right, the phenotype is not completely explained by the genotype, so we should expect a lower heritability. So if we open up our output file, so if we look at that, our output file, we put our additive, and we have our phenotype again, so let's do those graphs. X and phenotype is Y. Hit OK. Now we can see that there's a lot of variance around those means, and we fit a line to those, and we get an R-square of 0.66, right? So that now we're only explaining 66% of the variance. So in the next one, we'll talk about another way to measure heritability from population and nature.